So you might want to brace yourselves because I'm going to be talking about Cosmic Skeptic for a while. Why? Well, I mean, there's a lot of thoughts out there. These kind of put out there, and they're interesting. They're worth discussing, I think. I'll be putting in some extra stuff to talk about in between, just to kind of create some variety. But I will be kind of on this tear for a while. But there's a video. It's called "Morality Can't Be Objective Even If God Exists." And it confronts the idea that as an atheist and a moral subjectivist, he believed that if you do have theistic moorings, that you are kind of entitled to believing that morals can be objective, but that's the only circumstance where it is possible. But he's reversed that opinion. And the reason why comes from two primary things. The one is the working definition of morality they came up with, and second, a question that comes from it. All right. So number one, the morality is the intuition that we ought to do what is good, we ought not to do what is bad. Now, this is not a good definition, and the reason why is it is using subjectivist language in order to try and describe an objective idea. So, what do I mean by that? It begins with that morality is an intuition, and whereas him being a subjectivist, of course he believes that there are certain things that kind of feel right and certain things that kind of feel wrong, but that's not objective morality. In fact, most of objective morality is in defiance of our kind of basest intuitions, because our basic intuitions are path of least resistance, minimal effort, greatest reward, pursuing the dopamine and the oxytocin, and the 4Fs, kind of programming, right? That we avoid pain, we avoid discomfort, we pursue pleasure, we pursue highs and adrenaline and so forth, right? That's kind of intuitive. I mean, from the smallest child, you can see them engaging in that kind of decision making. That they want what they want because it makes them feel good. They want sugar, not vegetables. They want candy and ice cream, right? They will eat themselves sick on goods and sweets, but they will leave their vegetables on the plate because they don't want to eat them because they don't like the way they taste, right? That's intuitive, but it's not objective. Next thing is that he uses the words good and bad, which we ought to do what is good, we ought not to do what is bad. This also is very subjective language. Subjective morals deals with goods and bads, that this is a good thing to do, this is a bad thing to do, but it always ends up centering back down on myself, my family or close loved ones, or society as a whole. Those are kind of the three-legged stool, I guess, of subjective morality. Does it benefit me? Does it benefit my loved ones? And does it benefit society as a whole? There are certain things that benefit society, but not necessarily me directly. For instance, embezzling from my company might benefit me for a while because I'm getting a lot of money, or if I get like corrupt political dealings that make me very wealthy, right? But those will probably harm society, and then if I end up going to prison for it, it's going to harm my family as well and myself, right? That, I mean, it just kind of intertwines themselves. It's just kind of like this weird amorphous bubble of morality, that it's goods trying to get the best possible for the lowest high risk or high reward, low risk, right? But objective morality is rights and wrongs. That, quite honestly, when you use the language of right and wrong rather than of good and bad, it immediately becomes axiomatic. Versus, so this is an example. So morality, let's even still use the intuition. The intuition that we ought to do that which is right, and we ought not to do that which is wrong. Now, it's still flawed because I'm using the term intuition still, but when you put in the word right and wrong, those objective terms, instead of the subjective terms of good and bad, it resolves itself logically immediately. Because at the very end of the video, he comes up with this, the kind of the straw that breaks the camel's back is, he asks the clearly begged question, right, by this terminology, this definition that he uses, why ought we do that which is good? And it's, well, good by what definition? And he just kind of glances over, how do you define what is good and what is bad? Because from a subjective worldview, you can't. Every individual, every subject is going to have their own definition of what is good and bad, and that is what is self-refutational about the idea of why we ought to do what is good, why we ought to do what is bad. That's the problem. That's why he's spinning his wheels on this issue. Whereas if you change it out and you go to the objective language of why we ought to do what is good, or why we ought to do what is right, and why we ought not do what is wrong, because it's right, right? As kind of an example, we talk about rights as in like society, our inalienable rights as individuals all the time. Something that, I mean, the right to vote, own a firearm is kind of a big deal right now. The right to free contracts, or the right of freedom from unlawful search, or the right of travel, the right, like there's various rights that we experience, and it's kind of a, like, where do they come from? If morality is subjective, there are no rights. There are no wrongs, right? And so if you violate someone's human rights, who cares? Because it benefits me, it benefits society. Like, it benefits society to take the detestables of society and cordon them off, quarantine them, gulag them, whatever, like to expel them so that we can have a clean and homogeneous society. Society becomes more stable that way, right? But it violates those people's rights to do so. So even though we might see it as a subjective good, they obviously see it as a subjective bad. And that's how you end up with the Russian gulags, concentration camps, so forth, right? Because as long as it's benefiting, I can justify it. I can rationalize it. But if you ask the question of, is it the right thing to do? All of a sudden you have a major speed bump, a major roadblock as far as doing just about anything. Is it the right thing to do? And it's not enough to say, well, it's not wrong either, because there's a lot of things that you can say, well, it's not wrong, but it's not right either, right? So, how these things interlace, doing the right thing for the wrong reason, right thing for the right reason, right? The key here is this. Because he prepared the video, he kind of set the premise using this subjectivist language. He made it impossible to actually assess the reality of objective morals. And so he created, it's a straw man. He's straw manned the idea, the concept of objective morals through his own subjective lens. Now, I don't know if that's a subconscious thing, maybe, that because he's a subjectivist, that it just kind of seeped in, and because he's inclined to agree with that definition, now it's there, or if it's something he did on purpose. But either way, the argument is it fails itself by essentially it refutes itself. So anyway, agree, disagree, let me know, and we can discuss it more.